She had it all: a perfect marriage, a dream home, and a successful husband. But an innocent flirtation with her trainer turned into playing with fire, a game she couldn't stop. Her secret began to unravel when her husband discovered evidence of her betrayal, and Alex, the man she considered just a fling, started blackmailing her, tearing everything apart. Family, career, reputation, all were at risk. Will she regain control or lose it all forever? Find out how this story of intrigue, betrayal, and life-changing decisions unfolds. The sweet taste of deception. How temptation turned her life into chaos. Alice always seemed like the perfect wife. A slim blonde with blue eyes sparkling with confidence, she was the kind of woman every man dreamed of. Her husband, Tom, worked at a prestigious law firm and was often away for weeks on business trips. They lived in a spacious home in suburban New Jersey, where everything appeared flawless. But perfection was just a facade. Behind those walls, Alice felt forgotten and unappreciated. Evenings were spent alone, scrolling through Instagram, where her friends shared photos of romantic dates and exotic vacations. Tom spent more and more time at work, and their relationship had turned into a routine. One day, during a workout at the local gym, Alice met Alex. His confident smile, athletic build, and ease in conversation immediately caught her attention. Alex worked as a personal trainer, and as it turned out, they often crossed paths at the gym. At first, their conversations were casual, about workouts, healthy living, and even smoothie recipes. But with each encounter, their gazes lingered a little longer, and their words carried more weight. One day, Alex offered to give her a personal training session. "Just for you, Alice," he said, winking. Though her mind flashed warning signs, her heart said otherwise. During their first session in a private room, Alex stood closer than necessary. His hands casually brushed against her waist, his voice softened, and his gaze lingered longer than usual. She felt a rush of adrenaline she hadn't experienced in years. "It's just a flirtation," Alice assured herself as she drove home. But that night, she couldn't sleep. Her thoughts kept returning to Alex, his smile, his hands. The next day, he sent her a message. "Hope your muscles aren't too sore from the workout. If they are, I know how I can help." Winking face. She stared at her phone screen for a long time, feeling a flutter in her chest. She could have ignored the message, but instead, her fingers typed a response on their own. "They're not sore. But maybe I do need your help again." Alice sat in her bright kitchen, staring out the window. The sun, which gilded the grass in their backyard, seemed to mock her. On the table lay her phone, the screen glowing with another message from Alex. "How about a session tomorrow? I've got some new moves you'll love." Her heart raced. She knew this wasn't just about training anymore. By responding, she was taking the first step into a world she had previously closed off. The next day, she was back at the gym. Alex waited for her at the entrance, his smile exuding a confidence she hadn't seen in Tom for a long time. "Ready for a new challenge?" he asked, his voice holding something more than professional interest. "Always ready," she replied, walking with him into the private gym room. Alex had prepared some new exercises, but today, Alice was more focused on him than her form. His hands occasionally brushed her shoulders, her back, sometimes lingering longer than necessary. "You're improving, Alice. I'm proud of you," he said after a set, his words bringing a warmth she hadn't felt at home in years. "Thank you, Alex. You seem to know exactly how to lift my spirits." He smiled. "I'm always happy to make your day better." After the workout, Alex suggested grabbing a protein shake at the bar nearby. Alice hesitated, but eventually agreed. Their conversation smoothly shifted from fitness to personal topics. "How's life at home?" he asked, his eyes attentive. "Stable," she replied, feeling her voice tremble slightly. "Are you happy?" The question caught her off guard. She couldn't answer right away, and he noticed. "You know, sometimes it feels like stability and happiness are two different things," Alex added, looking directly into her eyes. "Maybe," she sighed. They sat side by side, and the silence between them spoke louder than any words. Her heart raced when she felt his hand accidentally brush against hers. "Alice, you deserve more," he said, his voice quiet and confident. "You don't know me, Alex." I know more than you think. Her breathing grew heavier as he leaned in closer. His eyes met hers, and she felt the whole world around them disappear. Alex, she whispered, but she couldn't finish because his lips were already near hers. It was like an explosion. Her mind screamed that this was wrong, but her body couldn't resist. She didn't know how long it lasted, but when they finally pulled away from each other, her world had changed forever. At home, she felt torn apart. Her phone rang, and Tom's name appeared on the screen. She collected herself and answered, trying to sound calm. "Hi, honey. How are you?" he asked. "I'm fine," she said, hating how easily she managed to lie. "I'll be staying a few more days. There's a big case here." "I understand. Keep working, darling." She hung up the phone and stared at herself in the mirror for a long time. The woman looking back at her was completely different from the one who started this day. The next day, Alex sent her a message. "I can't stop thinking about last night. Maybe we should do it again?" Her fingers trembled as she typed a response, but before she could hit send, the front door suddenly opened, and Tom appeared on the threshold with a suitcase. Alice sat in the living room, clutching a cup of hot coffee. Her thoughts raced like shattered fragments of a mirror. Last night with Alex had been a whirlwind, passionate, risky, and wrong in all the right ways. She hadn't yet figured out what to do next when an unexpected knock at the door startled her. Alex stood on the threshold. Confident, with a slight smile on his lips, he looked as if everything was going according to plan. "I couldn't just wait for you to reply," he said, leaning closer as she opened the door. "Alex, what are you doing here?" Her voice sounded confused, but her eyes betrayed something else. "I figured seeing you in person was better than waiting for a dry text message." His voice was warm, but his gaze was serious. Alice nervously glanced back, as though fearing Tom might walk into the room at any moment. "Tom's still on his business trip, isn't he?" His words were more of a statement than a question. "Alex, this isn't the place for this conversation. You shouldn't have come here." "Why?" He stepped closer, making her retreat a few inches. "Don't you want to see me?" "This isn't the place or the time," she said, trying to sound confident, but her voice betrayed her. "Then tell me outright." His eyes locked onto hers, and his hand gently touched hers. "Tell me you don't want this, and I'll leave." She stayed silent. Her heart pounded like crazy. Her mind screamed, "Stop," but her body was already stepping toward him. "You shouldn't be afraid of your desires, Alice," Alex whispered. "I know you want this just as much as I do." When he leaned in closer, her hands instinctively landed on his chest. She tried to push him away, but in the end, she only allowed him to lift her face toward him. Their kiss was as explosive as it had been in the gym, but this time, there were no prying eyes or mirrored walls to constrain them. "This is madness," she whispered when they paused for a moment. "But it's what you want, isn't it?" His smile was dangerously enticing. "Alex, you don't understand what this could destroy." Her voice sounded like an attempt to convince herself. "And what if I don't want to stop?" His words echoed in her mind once more. She wanted to say something, but at that moment, she heard the sound of an engine pulling up to the house. Her heart pounded so hard she felt it in her throat. "You have to go," she said sharply, pushing him toward the back door. "But Alice." "Go, while there's still time." Alex raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, a slight smile on his face. "Fine, fine. But this isn't over, Alice." She quickly shut the door behind him and, exhaling, tried to compose herself. The engine stopped, and a few seconds later, Tom entered through the door, suitcase in hand. "I decided to come back a few days early." "Surprise you?" he asked, pulling her into a hug. "Yes, very much," she replied, trying to hide the tremble in her voice. That night, Alice lay in bed next to Tom, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She tried to understand how everything had spiraled so far out of control. She tried to pinpoint the moment her life had begun to fall apart. Then her phone buzzed softly. A message from Alex. "I'll be waiting for you tomorrow. And this time, I won't stop." She turned off the screen, but a storm raged inside her that could no longer be contained. Alice nervously adjusted her dress, sitting at a table in a cozy restaurant. Tom had ordered their favorite red wine, smiling at her the way he always used to at the beginning of their marriage. The evening seemed perfect, a chance to remind herself that their relationship still had a future. "You look stunning, sweetheart," Tom said, raising his glass. "Thank you," Alice replied, smiling, though her thoughts were a chaotic mess. She tried to convince herself that the last few days were just a mistake she could forget. Tom's words were interrupted by the arrival of a waiter, who placed their dishes in front of them. But along with him, another figure entered the room. Alice looked up, and her heart sank. "Alex." He looked as confident as ever in a black shirt with a few buttons undone, wearing that smile that both attracted and terrified her. Alex paused for a moment, meeting her gaze, then calmly walked to a nearby table. Alice felt a wave of adrenaline wash over her. She tried not to show her reaction, but Tom noticed her tension. "Is everything okay?" he asked, leaning closer. "Yes, just a little tired," she replied, averting her eyes. Alex sat at a table across from them, and Alice felt his gaze piercing through her. Throughout dinner, she tried to focus on her conversation with Tom, but every time she looked up, Alex was there. His presence was impossible to ignore. When Tom went to the restroom, Alex seized the moment and approached her table. "You look incredible, Alice," he said, leaning toward her. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice filled with panic. "Couldn't miss the chance to see you again." His eyes sparkled with dangerous amusement. "Alex, you can't be here. If Tom sees us together." "So what? Are you afraid he'll find out how little he really knows about you?" "Alex, please. This isn't the time or place." She tried to remain calm, but her hands trembled. "You know, patience has never been my strength, Alice," he said, lifting his hand and casually brushing her fingers on the table. At that moment, Tom returned to the table. Alex immediately stepped back, returning to his seat as if nothing had happened. "Everything okay?" Tom asked as he sat down. "Yes, everything's fine," she replied, but her voice betrayed her once again. The evening came to an end, and Tom suggested they head home. Alice agreed, relieved to escape this dangerous game. But as they were leaving the restaurant, Alex was there again. "Good night, Alice," he said loudly enough for Tom to hear. Tom stopped, looking at Alex with curiosity. "Is he someone you know?" Tom asked, looking at his wife. "No, just a client at the gym," she quickly replied, averting her eyes. Tom frowned but said nothing. That night at home, Alice couldn't sleep. Tom had fallen asleep next to her, but her thoughts kept returning to the restaurant. Alex had started a dangerous game that could destroy everything. Her phone vibrated again. It was a message from Alex. "Tonight was just the beginning, Alice. You won't be able to ignore me." She grabbed her phone, intending to reply, but heard Tom shift in bed. Quickly, she turned off the screen, pressing the phone to her chest. Alice stood by the kitchen table, slowly turning a coffee cup in her hands. Tom, as usual, was reading the newspaper at the table, but his face was tense. It wasn't the usual silence she was used to. No, it was the calm before the storm. "You were acting very strange last night," Tom finally said, not lifting his eyes from the page. "What do you mean?" Her voice sounded unnaturally calm, but inside, every nerve was taut. "That man, Alex. You said he's a client at the gym, but why did he speak to you like you've known each other for a long time?" Alice tried to come up with words that wouldn't provoke more questions. We've worked out together a couple of times." "That's all," she shrugged, trying to mask her tension. "A couple of times?" Tom set the newspaper aside and, for the first time all morning, looked directly at her. His gaze was sharp, like a blade. "Alice, I can always tell when you're lying to me." "I'm not lying," she replied, perhaps a bit too quickly. Tom stood and walked closer to her. "It seems like this Alex is a little too interested in you. What are you hiding?" His words hung in the air like an explosion. She feigned surprise. "Tom, are you serious? Are you jealous of my trainer?" "Jealous?" He smiled, but his smile was far from warm. "I just want to know if there's something you're not telling me." Alice looked him straight in the eye. "Nothing, Tom. Nothing that should make you suspicious." But her words sounded as convincing as empty promises. Tom stared at her for a few more seconds, then stepped back. Fine, he said dryly, sitting back down. But if I see this Alex near you again, we'll have a serious conversation. That day, Alice received a message from Alex. Has your husband started to suspect anything? I hope it doesn't interfere with our plans. She held the phone, her fingers trembling. She knew she should ignore him, but instead, she typed a reply. Alex, you're causing problems. I need you to disappear. The response came immediately. Disappear? It's too late for that, Alice. I know you want me as much as I want you. That evening, while Tom worked in his study, Alice received another message. Alex had sent her a photo taken during their last training session. They were too close, their bodies nearly touching. What happens if Tom sees this? Was written under the photo. Alice felt her heart drop. She couldn't let that happen. Alex, stop. You don't want to ruin my life, she wrote back. His reply was short and cold. My life without you is already ruined. Now it's your turn. The next day, Tom suggested they go to lunch at his favorite restaurant. Alice couldn't refuse. Doing so would raise more suspicion. But as they walked into the restaurant, she saw Alex sitting at one of the tables. Her heart started pounding again. Tom noticed her tension. Is something wrong? He asked, leaning closer. No, everything's fine, she replied, trying not to look in Alex's direction. But Alex didn't leave her unnoticed. He approached their table, holding a glass of wine. Hello, Alice. His voice was warm and far too familiar. Hello, Alex, she replied, trying to sound neutral. And this must be your husband? Alex glanced at Tom with a faint smile. Yes, this is Tom. Alice tried not to show how hard it was to breathe. Tom, nice to meet you. Alex extended his hand, but Tom didn't reciprocate the gesture. Excuse us, but we're having lunch, Tom said coldly. Alex nodded, but before leaving, he leaned toward Alice and whispered softly, I won't let you get rid of me so easily. Tom noticed the movement, and after Alex left, he turned to his wife. What did he say to you? His voice was icy. Nothing important, she replied, but she knew the lie sounded too obvious. Alice walked into the gym with a determined stride, wearing her favorite outfit that always gave her a sense of strength and confidence. But this time, her confidence was a facade. Inside, she felt her nerves tighten as she prepared to confront Alex. She wanted to end it all once and for all. Alex was already waiting. He stood by the mirrors in the corner of the gym, his smile betraying not care but confidence in his hold over her. Punctual as always, he said as she approached. I came to talk, Alice replied firmly, standing directly in front of him. Of course. But as always, conversations with you tend to get very interesting. Alex stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Stop, Alex. This has gone too far. Gone too far? Alice, we've only just begun, he laughed, and the sound sent a cold sweat down her back. Alex, I don't want this anymore. It's over. His smile vanished, replaced by something darker in his eyes. He leaned closer, so close she could feel his breath. Over? That's what you've decided? Well, I have other plans. Alex lifted his phone and showed her a photo. On the screen was a candid moment from their gym session, her laughing, his hand on her waist. The photo would look innocent only to someone unaware of the context. What are you doing? She whispered, her heart racing faster. Giving you a choice, Alice. Either you stay with me, or this photo, along with a few of our messages, goes straight to your husband. You wouldn't dare. I'll do whatever I want. His voice was cold and confident. Alice felt panic rising within her. She knew Alex wasn't bluffing. He'd gone too far to simply stop now. Alex, you'll destroy everything. You'll ruin me, my husband, my entire life. But this is what you want, isn't it? You want me as much as I want you. Otherwise, why are you still here? His words cut into her consciousness like knives. Alex, I'm begging you. Just leave me alone. Her voice broke, and she could barely hold back tears. Leave you? No, Alice. You're mine now, and I won't let you walk away. That evening, Alice sat at home, watching Tom as he flipped through channels on the TV. He looked so calm, so far removed from the storm brewing in her life. Her phone vibrated again. A message from Alex. Time's running out, Alice. Make your choice. She knew this was the moment she had to decide. But no matter what choice she made, the consequences would be catastrophic. Alice entered the house, carrying grocery bags. The sun was setting, and an unusual silence filled the space. Tom usually worked in his study, but today the door was ajar, and Tom was nowhere to be seen. She placed the bags on the table and began unpacking the groceries when her phone, left on the kitchen counter, vibrated. Alice glanced at the screen and felt a chill in her chest. A message from Alex. I hope you've made your decision. I've got a plan for tomorrow. The sudden sound of footsteps made her spin around. Tom was standing in the doorway, holding her phone in his hand. His face was tense, and his eyes were colder than she had ever seen them. Did you lose something, Alice? He asked, holding the phone up in front of him. Tom, it's not what you think, she replied quickly, feeling her voice betray her panic. Not what I think, he laughed, but it was a harsh, humorless laugh. Then explain to me who Alex is and why he's texting you like you're lovers. Alice took a step toward him, trying to grab the phone, but Tom stepped back. Don't move, his voice grew harsher. You're going to explain everything to me today. And I mean everything. He's just a trainer, Tom. We worked out together a few times, and he got a little too persistent. Persistent? He raised an eyebrow. Then why are you responding to him? Why does he know so much about our life? Are you trying to tell me this means nothing? It was a mistake, she whispered, lowering her eyes. Alice, look at me, he demanded, his voice trembling with anger. Is he just a trainer, or is it something more? She stayed silent, unsure of what to say. Her silence spoke louder than any words. Tom stepped closer, holding the phone as if it were evidence of a crime. Did you cheat on me? His voice was quiet, but it carried an explosive rage. Tom, it's not what you think, she tried, but his gaze stopped her. Then explain what it is, Alice. Explain why another man is texting you like there's something between you. Explain why I'm finding out about this through your messages and not from you. It was foolish. I didn't want it to go this far, she said, her voice breaking. Go this far? He threw the phone onto the table and stepped closer. What exactly went this far, Alice? Did you love him? Or was it just a game? No, I didn't love him. It was a mistake I regret now. Regret? Do you regret it because I found out, or because you ruined everything we had? Their conversation turned into a shouting match. Tom accused, and Alice defended herself. But every word, every attempt at justification only added fuel to the fire. I trusted you, Alice. I worked to provide for us, to give us this life. And what did you do? You decided to risk it all for this trainer? Tom, I didn't want this to happen. I don't know why I let it get this far. You don't know? You don't know? He yelled, his voice echoing off the walls. He turned and grabbed the phone, opening the photos and messages. Do you want me to show this to your friends? To your parents? Or maybe I should have a talk with this Alex personally. Alex isn't who you think he is, Tom. He threatened me. I tried to end it, but he won't leave me alone. Threatened? His voice dropped, becoming quiet but dangerous. And you said nothing? You just let it continue? Tom left the room, leaving her standing in silence. But a minute later, he returned, holding his suitcase. Where are you going? She asked, her voice cracking. I can't stay here, Alice. I can't stay with you, knowing what you did. Tom, please. We can fix this. I'll do whatever you want. But can I ever trust you again? Can I ever look at you and not see this betrayal? He walked out the door, leaving her alone with the phone still glowing with messages from Alex. Tom sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. His thoughts swirled in turmoil. On the passenger seat beside him, his phone lay with the screen still lit up, displaying an open message from Alex. Tom copied the phone number into a search engine and quickly discovered where this trainer worked. The anger and sense of betrayal left him no choice. He had to confront Alex personally and put an end to this story. He parked outside the gym where Alex worked and stepped out of the car. The cold wind brushed against his face, but it didn't stop him. Through the glass, he saw Alex talking to a woman, radiating the same confidence that had captivated Alice. Tom clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. Time to act, he muttered to himself and walked inside. Alex noticed him the moment Tom crossed the threshold. Their eyes met, and Alex gave a faint smile. He gestured for the woman he was talking to step aside and walked toward Tom. "Can I help you?" Alex asked with fake politeness, which only infuriated Tom further. "Oh, you know why I'm here," Tom replied, unable to mask his anger. "No, I don't." Alex tilted his head, feigning confusion. "But if you're here about Alice, I can guess you've learned about us." "About you?" Tom stepped forward, his fists clenched. "You barged into my life, into my marriage. Do you think I'm just going to let this go?" "Let this go?" Alex laughed. "Tom, your marriage is already over. You just don't want to admit it." Tom took another step forward, stopping so close to Alex that they could feel each other's breath. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Tom whispered, his voice laced with threat. "Oh, I know exactly who you are. And I know you can't win her back. You've lost, Tom. She chose me, even if she's afraid to admit it." Those words were the final straw. Tom grabbed Alex by the collar and shoved him against the wall. Gym patrons stopped what they were doing to watch the scene unfold. "If you ever go near my wife again, I'll destroy you," Tom hissed, glaring directly into Alex's eyes. "Do it," Alex replied, his tone no longer friendly. "Let's see how that ends for you." Suddenly, Alice entered the gym. She saw the scene and immediately understood what was happening. "Tom, what are you doing?" she shouted, rushing over. "Dealing with this manipulator," Tom growled, not letting go of Alex. "Tom, let him go now." Alice's voice sounded like she was pleading. "You're actually defending him right now?" Tom released Alex abruptly and turned to Alice. "This has gone too far. Both of you need to stop." Alex adjusted his collar, trying to appear nonchalant. "He's taking out his frustration on me because he can't handle his emotions. But you know who really holds the power here, Alice." "Shut up," Tom shouted, turning back toward Alex. "Enough." Alice's voice was firm. "You're both acting like children. Tom, leave. We'll talk at home." Tom looked at her, and the disappointment in his eyes was unmistakable. "Talk at home? You want to talk after all this?" "Tom, please. This isn't the place for this conversation." Tom took a deep breath, grabbed his coat, and left the gym without saying another word. He sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. His thoughts were racing. On the seat next to him, his phone lay glowing with an open message from Alex. Tom had copied the number into a search engine earlier and quickly found where this trainer worked. The anger and sense of betrayal left him no choice. He had to confront Alex personally and put an end to this story. "Can I help you?" Alex asked with fake politeness, which only made Tom angrier. "Oh, you know why I'm here," Tom replied, unable to contain his rage. "No, I don't." Alex tilted his head, feigning confusion. "But if you're here because of Alice, I can guess you've found out about us." "About you?" Tom stepped forward, his fists clenched. "You invaded my life, my marriage. Do you think I'll just allow this to happen?" "Allow this?" Alex laughed. "Tom, your marriage is already broken. You just don't want to admit it." Tom took another step forward, stopping so close to Alex that they could feel each other's breath. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Tom whispered, his voice laced with a threat. "Oh, I know exactly who you are. And I know you can't win her back. You've lost, Tom. She chose me, even if she's afraid to admit it." Those words were the final straw. Tom grabbed Alex by the collar and shoved him against the wall. The gym patrons stopped what they were doing to watch the scene unfold. "If you ever come near my wife again, I'll destroy you," Tom hissed, staring directly into Alex's eyes. "Do it," Alex replied, his tone no longer friendly. "Let's see how that ends for you." Suddenly, Alice walked into the gym. She saw the scene and immediately understood what was happening. "Tom, what are you doing?" she shouted, running toward them. "Dealing with this manipulator," Tom growled, not letting go of Alex. "Tom, let him go now." Alice's voice sounded like she was pleading. "You're actually defending him right now?" Tom abruptly released Alex and turned to Alice. "This has gone too far. Both of you need to stop." Alex adjusted his collar, trying to appear nonchalant. He's taking his frustration out on me because he can't deal with his emotions. But you know who really has the power in this situation, Alice? Shut up, Tom shouted, turning back to Alex. Enough. Alice's voice was firm. You're both acting like children. Tom, leave. We'll talk at home. Tom looked at her, and the disappointment in his eyes was unmistakable. Talk at home? You want to talk after all this? Tom, please. This isn't the place for this conversation. Tom took a deep breath, grabbed his coat, and left the gym without saying another word. When Tom got into the car, his phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. Don't think I'll give up. I'll still get what I want. Tom remained silent the entire drive home. Alice sat next to him, feeling the tension hanging between them. She tried to start a conversation several times, but his silence spoke louder than any words. When they arrived home, Tom got out of the car, slammed the door shut, and headed to the living room. Alice followed him, trying to find the right words. She knew any explanation she gave would sound like an excuse, but she couldn't leave things as they were. Tom, please listen to me, she began, but he turned to her abruptly. Listen? After everything I saw today, you want me to just sit down and calmly listen to you? Yes, because you don't know the whole story, she replied, her voice trembling with panic. Then tell me, Alice. Tell me everything I need to know. But let me warn you. If I hear one more lie, this will be the end. She sighed and sat down on the edge of the couch, her hands nervously clutching the hem of her dress. It started as something innocent, she said quietly. I was lonely, Tom. You were always busy. We stopped talking. We stopped being close. And then Alex came along. Oh, and you thought it was a great idea to start an affair with some trainer to fill the void? It wasn't an affair, she snapped. I don't love him. It was more like an escape. From reality, from the person I've become. Tom laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. An escape? Do you even hear yourself? You're blaming me for your decision to betray our marriage? I didn't betray you in the way you think, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. But you let this man into your life, into our marriage. You allowed him to destroy everything we built together. Tom, you're not without fault either, she said, her voice turning more resolute. Oh, so now it's my fault? Yes. You've been absent, even when you were physically here. All you cared about was your work, your business. I felt like you didn't care anymore, like I didn't exist. And that justifies your behavior? No, but it explains how I ended up here. Tom abruptly stood up from the chair, pacing the room. So, you're saying I should feel guilty because you decided to bring this, Alex, into our lives? I'm saying we both made mistakes, she replied. But there's something you don't know, she added, her voice trembling. Something else? Oh God, Alice, what else are you hiding? She looked up, and fear flickered in her eyes. Alex is blackmailing me, Tom. He's threatening to expose everything unless I do what he wants. Blackmailing? His voice was laced with disbelief. Yes, he has photos, messages. He said he'll show them to everyone if I don't stay with him. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Because I was afraid you'd do something reckless. Like today. Tom sank onto the couch beside her. His anger began to give way to despair. How did we get here, Alice? I don't know, Tom, but I know I want to fix this. I don't want to lose you. You've already lost me, he said quietly, and her heart clenched in pain. Then give me a chance to make it right. Give me a chance to show you that I still love you. Tom lifted his head and looked at her. His eyes were cold, but there was still a glimmer of the emotions they once shared. If you want the truth, Alice, then be prepared to hear my truth as well, he said. Her heart froze. The morning was unnaturally quiet. Alice woke to the sound of notifications flooding her phone. One after another, they kept coming. She reached for her device, and her heart sank instantly. The screen was filled with alerts, texts, emails, calls. All of them were about one thing. The first message she opened was from her close friend. Alice, have you seen what's happening? Check social media. It's a disaster. A sense of dread consumed her. She quickly opened Instagram, where her profile had exploded with comments and tags. Alex had kept his promise. He had posted their photos, fragments of their conversations, and even a gym video where they appeared far too close. The caption read, "Sometimes the truth hurts. Does she deserve forgiveness?" Alice felt the ground fall out from beneath her. She hurried downstairs, where Tom was already sitting with a tablet in his hands. His face was pale, his expression cold and distant. "Is it true?" His voice was calm, but the barely concealed disappointment was palpable. "Tom, it's not what it looks like." "It's not what it looks like?" he snapped, lifting his head sharply. "Alice, everything is online. Every one of our friends, every one of my colleagues has seen it. Are you trying to tell me it's not true?" "It's Alex. He's manipulating everything. He wanted revenge because I rejected him. But you gave him a reason. You let him into our lives, Alice. And now, our life is falling apart before our eyes." Tom stood up and began pacing the room, his steps heavy and agitated. "Do you understand that this isn't just a private issue? This is turning into a public scandal. My reputation, my career, everything is at risk because of your decisions. Tom, I didn't know he was capable of this. I tried to end it, but he wouldn't listen to me. You should have come to me sooner, not waited until everything exploded. Now you want me to fix this for you." Alice lowered her head, her shoulders trembling. She knew her words wouldn't change anything. Meanwhile, the situation on social media was escalating. Comments grew harsher, and the photos spread like wildfire. Friends and acquaintances began messaging Tom, either offering their support or feigning indifference, which only added fuel to the fire. Alice didn't know what to do. She tried to message Alex, but he didn't respond. His silence spoke louder than any words. Tom began packing his things and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Alice asked, tears streaming down her face. "I need to think. To think about whether there's any point in this marriage after all of this. Tom, please, don't leave me now. I made a mistake, but I love you. We can fix this." "You made a mistake?" "This isn't a mistake, Alice. This is a choice. And now we're both paying for your choices." When Tom left, Alice was left alone in the empty house. Her phone continued to vibrate, but she no longer looked at it. She sank to the floor, hugging her knees, feeling her world collapse. Then there was a knock at the door. She hoped it was Tom coming back, but when she opened it, Alex was standing on the porch. "I warned you, Alice," he said with a faint smile. "What have you done? You've ruined everything, Alex. I begged you to leave me alone. You had the chance to be with me, but you chose to fight for something that's been dead for a long time. Now you see that I was right. Alex, get out of here. If Tom sees you, if he sees me, and what then? He already hates you now. What do you have to lose?" "Lose? I've already lost everything because of you." She shoved him toward the door, but he dodged and grabbed her arm. "Calm down, Alice. This can all be fixed, but only if you finally stop fighting what's inevitable." "I hate you," she screamed, trying to pull away from his grip. Alex leaned in closer, staring into her eyes. "You hate me as much as you love me. The problem is, you can't decide which one you feel more." Suddenly, the sound of a car engine filled the air. Tom had returned. He saw Alex at the door and froze. His face was stone-like. "What is he doing here?" Tom asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Alex, leave," Alice shouted, pushing him out of the doorway. "Tom, I just wanted to talk," Alex began, but Tom cut him off. "You've said enough. If you don't leave right now, I'll call the police." Alex raised his hands in a gesture of surrender and slowly backed away toward his car. "This isn't over, Alice," he said before getting into his car and driving out of sight. Tom entered the house, closing the door behind him. "You really let him come here? After everything that's happened?" "I didn't invite him, Tom. He came on his own." "And you think that's an excuse?" She remained silent, lowering her head. "I don't know if we have a chance to fix this, Alice, but I do know one thing. This man won't leave us alone." Alice was left alone in the dark room, her thoughts chaotic. She understood what she had done. She understood what she had lost. But now, everything depended on whether she could rebuild what had been destroyed. Is a second chance worth it when trust has already been broken?